So good afternoon, everyone. My name is JJJ, and I would like to welcome each and every one of you to our June regional meeting. I'm JJJ, the South Regional Coordinator. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking out time to participate in this June IOSH West African Network South-South CPD session and meeting. And as we are all aware, if you're not aware, this meeting is currently being held in 3 regions in Nigeria. That's this one, the South-South, the Southwest, and the North Central. And it's also been held in the Ghana district. So we're having this meeting simultaneously in 4 regions. I'd like to recognize the IOSH West African Network Chair, Mr. Temitope Mudele, and all the central executives, the Vice, Mrs. Kemi, and Gabriel Bolasito, the Central Secretary, who is represented here with us this afternoon. Thank you, Gabriel, for joining us. I also want to recognize the entire South-South executives, Deseye, Jackson, and Solomon. Thank you all for joining us today. For this meeting today, Deseye will be our moderator. So all questions regarding the technical presentation, even when it's going on, should be sent to the chat, which is at the bottom of your screen. During and after the presentation session, you can also use the chat to drop all your feedbacks, your comments, and please, I'll request that we try and put our microphones on mute during the meeting. Just a reminder for those of us who are yet to move, our membership to IOSH West Africa should do so by sending an email to csc@iosh.com, and you can also kindly follow us on LinkedIn. And at the end of this meeting, if you have questions on all, Gabriel Bolasito would be here to answer our questions and our feedbacks and give us new updates from the Central Division. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Dave, for joining us today for this meeting too. And at this point, I'd like to hand over to Deseye, our moderator. So over to you, Deseye.
All right, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Please confirm you can hear me.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
All right.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. All right, at this juncture, I'd like to hand over to
Deseye, are you there? Deseye, are you there? Okay, I think maybe she has. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I think maybe she has network issues. So second on our agenda is the introduction of the speaker. And I would like to welcome Solomon to introduce the speaker. Solomon, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Solomon, and I will be introducing the speaker for today's meeting, which is titled Driving Meaningful Engagement in Health and Safety, which will be anchored by Dave McPherson. Dave started his career in health and safety just 6 years ago, having previously spent 18 years as a personal trainer and fitness manager. Starting out as a laborer performing industrial cleaning on a large power plant build, Dave quickly realized that his communication skills were extremely effective in influencing improvements in health and safety. Over the last 5 years, Dave has rapidly progressed from laborer to senior safety manager, having proven time and time again that communication and influencing skills are often what is needed the most to maintain and drive health and safety performance. After having picked up multiple industrial awards throughout 2021, Dave was selected as one of the 8 finalists and then judged as the winner of the highly coveted SHP Trailblazer in Health and Safety Award 2021. SHP Trailblazer Awards celebrate those who are going above and beyond
Sorry, everyone. I think Solomon had little network issues.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
I was kicked out
Solomon, you
of
can
by the
continue.
network. Yes, I was kicked
Okay,
out. Sorry.
Continue,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. Dave was nominated for this award for the pioneer work he is doing to prevent
Solomon, are you
Hello.
here?
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think we're having a general network issue today. I'm sorry.
All right, continue, please.
Okay. Dave was nominated for this award for pioneering work he is doing to prevent damage to underground utility services and infrastructure as the project lead of the USP competency framework. The judges were impressed with Dave's passion, vision for improvement, and commitment to influence change, highlighting how he had taken an idea and shared it with the wider industry. Now, working as the Senior Health and Safety Manager for Cave Highways, London region, Dave is responsible for the health and welfare for all of the Cave Highways operational team across the whole of London. In addition, Dave was co-opted into IOSH Council and served as the inaugural chair of the membership representing steering group and has helped shape initiatives to improve engagement and representation opportunity for IOSH members. In this presentation, Dave will share how his unique path to health and safety leadership have helped shape his strategy of driving meaningful and effective engagement, exploring and emphasizing the importance of strong communication and collaboration both internally and externally. So as you can see today, we will be having someone that is already embedded in the health and safety with so much knowledge. So I indulge you all to pay attention and as he begins his presentation. So I will hand over to the moderator to take over. Thank you.
All right.
I'm very sorry. We're having real difficulty hearing you there.
All right, I think she's having network issues. So thank you so much, Solomon, for the wonderful introduction. So at this point, we would like to call Mr. Dave to start your presentation. So over to you, Mr. Dave.
Thank you very much, Joseph, and thank you, Solomon, for a wonderful introduction, and thank you to everybody for taking the time out of your day to come and have a chat together about what we can do to improve health and safety. It's wonderful to be invited to be here with you on this call. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out to be part of this. So just before we go any further, can I just check, just put a thumbs up if you can see me and you can hear me and everything's all good, just so I can get a understanding of where we're at. I know we're having some network issues. If you can hear me, guys, put and guys, if you could put your hand up, that would be great.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, Dave.
Now, and I realise that we have some network issues, so obviously if you do stay off camera, that's absolutely fine. But I would say that for this presentation, it's quite important. Engagement, one of the most important things for me for engagement is connection, and connection is a lot easier when we can see each other's faces. So I would encourage, if people can put their camera on, so that we can all see each other and we can have a little bit more interaction, that would be absolutely superb. But I do understand if you're having network issues, you might want to keep your camera turned off to prevent that. So without further ado, thank you again for having me. And today I would like to talk to you about meaningful engagement and driving engagement with health and safety. So if you'll permit me, allow me to have the next 30 minutes or so of your time where we can explore this subject together. And it would be wonderful if at the end of this, you have some feedback or comments or suggestions or any kind of interaction would be most welcome. And I'll also say, please, let's not leave the conversation here today. So if you're on LinkedIn, please reach out on LinkedIn, send me a connection. If you type in Dave McPherson into LinkedIn, you should probably find me. If you're a member of IOSH, we'll have some shared connections, and I would encourage you to please do reach out after this. If you don't feel comfortable asking questions during this session, but there's stuff that you'd like to talk about, please, I absolutely welcome that. So let me begin by just asking a couple of really simple key questions. Number one, how does it feel when we really make a difference? How does it feel to our people when we really help them with something that really matters to them? My name's Dave McPherson, and I have had the privilege over the last 6 years of working with some incredible people within the construction sector, helping to support talented men and women across the country as they perform some really quite inspiring and fantastic work. So within this talk, I would like to take you on a bit of a journey, and that is how I came to be where I am and how it came to pass that I'm here having this conversation with you. And then I'd like to explore a little bit about the subject of driving engagement and a couple of experiences that really highlight how effective this process can be if you allow it to guide you. And it would be truly remarkable if throughout this conversation we can take away some little pieces that might help us in our day-to-day work, something that might help you to be effective, something that might reinforce and help me to be more effective with the engagement that we drive. So we all have a duty within health and safety, and that duty is to remind ourselves that we are here primarily to support people. More than anything else, in health and safety, our job is really purely and simply to ensure that those people undertaking operations for our organizations do so in a safe and harm-free way, so that all of the people who come to work to produce value for our company and our organization They come to work healthy and safe, and they leave healthy and safe at the end of the day. In order to achieve that, we first have to recognize that we are all people trying to do what we feel is the best thing to do. And if you've ever come across people who are making mistakes, if you've ever come across people who are perhaps engaging in activities and behaviors that you might feel are unsafe, perhaps first we can engage with those people rather than approaching these positions from policing or enforcement, and we'll cover that off a little later. So first, engage. Before we do anything else, we have to actually ensure that we are taking ourselves out of our ivory towers and putting ourselves in a position where we are working together with our workforce. Once we're there, that allows us and affords us a greater opportunity to connect with people on a personal basis, not on a professional basis, not on a academic basis, but on a real personal basis. And that helps definitely to create rapport, a greater degree of respect in both directions, and it enables us to get to the core of the issues that we're trying to fix. So what does that allow us to do? In turn, it means that we can really truly resolve the challenges that our people face on a day-to-day basis. And remember that that is ultimately our goal, to provide support, guidance, encouragement, and direction to enable our operational teams to overcome the challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis. So let's rewind a while. Let's take this back. And how is it that I came to be in this position where I'm in the fortunate position of being able to talk to you about something that I feel truly and deeply passionate about? Well, we all have our different journeys to get into health and safety, and we all have our different stories. For me, it's a bit of a strange route, and that is 6 years ago, I had been working in health and fitness for 18 years, the majority of my adult life. And that career, that 18-year career, if any of you have ever been involved in the fitness industry, you'll know that there's one thing that's more important for health and fitness than anything else, and that is people skills and the ability to influence and motivate and encourage and inspire people to make positive changes within our lifestyles and our habits. And that afforded me a wonderful opportunity to engage with an enormously diverse mix of individuals from just about every background imaginable. I'll never forget teaching a class where within the same class, I had somebody who worked as a dustman, a bin lorry removal operative, and also an international diamond dealer in exactly the same class, working together at the same time. And through that process of working with such a broad spectrum of individuals, that enabled me to develop the skills to communicate with people from all sorts of backgrounds. And over those 18 years, I dealt with tens of thousands of different people, different characters from different backgrounds. And there was always one underpinning theme that collated everything, and that was simply this. We are all searching for value, whether that's value for ourselves or to give value to other people. We are all aiming for something that generates value. That's no different when we go to work. We're going to work to create value for ourselves or for the company that we work for, and as a result, to get paid and to go home and provide for our families and for ourselves. It's really essentially important to understand that whatever walk of life we're from and whatever experiences that we have, that is the primary driving force that pushes us all. And so initially, when I was stepping out of that industry and I knew I needed to change, I knew I needed a different, needed a different direction, that my fitness journey had come to the end of its course. And I needed to really be able to provide for my family in a better way. I loved my job in fitness, but I always said that my wife, who works as an accountant, she had the real job and I was simply playing every day. So I was going out, I was having fun, I was training with people. It wasn't really what I would class as a serious job. And after having some discussions with my wife, we decided that we needed to add more value. We decided we needed to create something more significant so that we could provide for our future. And I got one of those nudges. I don't know if you've ever had one of these yourselves. I've certainly had many of them. The not so gentle nudge of a loving wife. I'm sure some of you have felt those nudges quite strongly. The nudge that says, you can do this, you can go out and try something brand new. And I looked around and I wanted to get into engineering. And I know that there's quite a few people on this call who have engineering background or experience. And this might really connect and resonate with you. So my family there's an engineering background in my family. My great uncle was the chief engineer for the Goonhilly radar station in the UK, the biggest and first radar station that was built. And I always found conversations with him and his sons fascinating about engineering solutions. And so I thought, well, I could do that. That sounds really interesting. It sounds like something I'd like to do. However, in order to get into engineering at the age of 34 and still be able to provide for my family, the jobs that I could take, I would need to have a degree in order to be able to access those jobs. However, in order to be able to enroll on the degree course to get access to those jobs, I would already have to be working in engineering. And that represented a big challenge for me. So for me, the key thing was, how can I start? And my wife found me this job online for a labouring position. And so I applied for it, jumped straight in, and I found myself working with a team of industrial cleaners looking after an enormous power station build. It was a £460 million project. It was absolutely huge. There was around about 1,000 people on this site every single day. And I had the privilege of looking after a small team of cleaners, and our job was to support all of the trades on the site. Now, imagine, and this is really quite powerful, perhaps this is where I have a slightly unique twist in health and safety. I've been a personal trainer for 18 years at this point. I've seen the inside of a gym, I've seen my house, I've gone to various different places, but I have never, ever seen anything like this before. So can you see this on my screen, this crawler crane? This is not exactly the crane. I hadn't decided to go out and work in the Middle East for my first ever job, but this was the closest image I could find. A crawler crane. This is a 600-ton labour crawler crane. And I was presented by one of these at the entrance to the site that I was working on every single day that I walked into the site. And if you've ever been on a project or been around one of these things, I can tell you these are absolutely fascinating. I was on that project for nearly 2 years, and the entire time I was there, I never ceased to be amazed by this crane and what it was capable of doing. And you can imagine, you can see really, you can get some perspective from the size of those tracks involved. The same size as a minibus or a small coach, just for the tracks that this thing moves on. And it's lifting these enormous 50-ton, 100-ton panels right up into the air over a 50-metre high structure, which was really something quite significant for me. Now, what was interesting in this, I guess, is my key start in my journey in health and safety. Imagine you're met with this crane in front of you, And as you walk in front and you have this crane in front of you, it's pretty obvious, I think, to most of us on this call that this represents some serious hazards. There's a lot of danger involved around operating around something like this unless you follow very strict protocols. And that was obvious to me. But something funny happens with human beings in environments. The longer we're in a single environment, the more tuned in we become to that environment and the less things start to stand out to us. People sometimes say this is complacency, and I disagree. I do not believe it's complacency. I believe firmly that it is desensitization to risk. People are not being lazy, they are simply no longer seeing this thing as that impressive or significant because we see it every day. It fades into the background of our perception. Just one of those other millions of things that we have to ignore every day for our brain to function in a normal society. If you constantly pay attention to everything, you'd go totally mad. So it's a natural human defense mechanism to start to acknowledge the familiarity of our surroundings and no longer be scared or intimidated by things that we've programmed ourselves to accept as standard. And that makes a lot of sense for this next step. Some of you may have been involved in lifting operations before, and you'll be aware of the fact that lifting operations have to be tightly controlled, because if something goes wrong, the consequences could really be tragic and significant. So imagine this picture: a young 18-year-old operative walks through the turnstiles, walks straight towards this crawler crane, moves an exclusion zone barrier, walks through the barrier, walks directly towards the crane, walks underneath a suspended load. This is a 600-ton, 100-meter high crane on tracks, and yet someone was able to just see this as part of his background to the point where he wasn't intimidated by it at all. You can probably imagine what people were saying on this site. There was lots of shouting, lots of noise, lots of excitement, and people were not being fully polite with some of the words that they were shouting to this young lad. I saw it a different way. Instead of abusing this young guy for making a stupid mistake that we all know was wrong, why would you do that? That's ridiculous. You should never, ever, ever do this. You're stupid. What's wrong with you? No, that's not. That just can't be the right way to handle things. So I put myself in his shoes and I thought, well, why was it that this young lad felt that that was okay for him to do? And that really triggered my initial entry into health and safety. So over the next 2 years, I had the privilege of working with all sorts of different trades and disciplines, from pipe fitters, welders, lifting crews, steel fabricators, insulators and laggers, scaffolders, you name it, loads and loads and loads of different operations and trades. And I never lost that fascination for the skill involved in the way in which people apply their craft. And I decided to take a different approach. Instead of policing, instead of enforcing, instead of trying to put on people what they must do, working together with people in such a way to enable them to do their job in a safer way. See, when I was a cleaner, I was walking around this site and I was one of us. Right? I was one of the guys. I was one of the crew. I wasn't a threat. I wasn't a problem. If someone was doing something wrong, they wouldn't be afraid to tell me that they were doing something wrong. Oh, don't let the safety guy see. You know, don't do this, don't do that. And they used to have a code, right? So walking around this enormous structure, it was all made of steel, 50 meters high, 200 meters by 200 meters. Anyone here who works in oil and gas or works in a big steel structure will probably be familiar with this. There's a code, the safety guy is coming, right? They knock on the pipe, ding, ding, ding. And all of a sudden you have a cascade of dings ringing around and echoing through the whole building. So if you're the safety guy or you're the safety girl and you're walking out into a site and you start hearing all of this dinging, What that is everybody telling you the safety guy is coming, whatever dangerous, stupid stuff you're getting up to, you need to stop that now and start following the rules, right? Now, when I became one of the safety team, it was very, very different. All of a sudden, I became one of them. Oh, don't tell him. You mustn't let him know. Watch out, he's coming. And that's crazy. For me, remember what I said at the beginning. For me, it's really important. Health and safety professionals are here to help. Now, there may be a few people in the industry who have some sort of satisfaction out of bossing people around and telling people what to do. But I really don't think that's the case for most of us. I genuinely believe that the vast majority of health and safety professionals get into the industry because of a deep desire to help and support people and make sure people are safe. And I'm sure that's the case with everybody on this call. So suddenly finding yourself becoming one of them and people avoiding you and not wanting to share their problems and not wanting to share their challenges, that seemed inherently and fundamentally wrong to me. And so I set about over the course of my career making an absolute conscious effort to ensure that first and foremost, I was not one of them, but I worked to build a bridge between the operational teams and the management teams to ensure that whatever was going on was understood and that the challenges were shared throughout the collective rather than taken on purely by those at an operational end. Now, I'm not particularly academic. I am dyslexic, and maybe some of you on the call are dyslexic, and you may be acutely aware of the certain challenges that presents. But I'm not here to talk to you about the difficulties and the struggles of dyslexia. I'm here instead partly to talk to you about the advantages of dyslexia. And this is something that people don't often talk about. So dyslexia is in fact not dyslexia at all. If you really think about it, it's absolutely stupid that we classify dyslexia as dyslexia. Dyslexia comes from the Greek bad words. Why would I define myself by being poor with written language and comprehension skills, when instead what dyslexia does is it allows people to have a greater freedom of creative expression and problem-solving skills and the ability to connect dots that perhaps other people can't see. And this is something which I felt passionate about driving because, and this is really key, in construction especially, a lot of our operational teams have a natural ability and skill base in practical problem-solving skills. The same people often don't have that high level of academic understanding, and often we find that our operational teams are not particularly good with paperwork and processes. But actually, if you look at the way and you spend time working with our operational teams in how they perform their duties, it truly is quite remarkable. And that's what really, for me, is the most significant thing about driving meaningful engagement. Do we really respect our operational teams? Do we understand the challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis? Do we spend enough time with the people who we are working with to truly, deeply understand the challenges that they're presented? Let me ask you this. Now, PPE. You may be aware of PPE, but this is a different type of PPE. No, I'm not talking about personal protective equipment. I'm talking about the PPE which governs everything that we do. And that is simply this. And I'll do it back to front. E stands for enforce. Health and safety has to include enforcement. And that is because, unfortunately, whatever the case is, whatever we do, there will always, unfortunately, be people who deliberately or negligently put other people at risk through their unsafe behaviours. When someone decides upon themselves that they are going to do something for their benefit, regardless of anybody else, there must be a degree of enforcement which is in place. However, there's a step earlier than that, which is often missed. Rather than allowing it to get to the enforcement stage, we should provide policing of our sites. And that is essentially a way for us to ensure that what we think is happening is happening. But policing, I'm not saying it in the way that you might think. We're not policing the people on the ground. We are policing the effectiveness of our own policies and procedures and how well they are adopted in the workplace. Do we really have a handle on how things are performed? And let's come back to that. Because the first one and the most important principle, forthright requirement for a health and safety professional is the provision of support and guidance and safe systems and encouragement and training and coaching. We provide a safe working environment for our operatives to perform their duty free from risk of harm, controlling those hazards to as low as reasonably practicable and reducing that risk as far as we possibly can. And the best way we can do that is to understand the actions of our personnel and how they perform those duties in the workplace. Now, up until recently, I didn't know that this principle had a name. You may have seen this photo before. It's called a desire path. Now, I didn't know that name until when I started researching for this presentation, and the key is that human beings are not lazy, but we are programmed to take the shortest route possible. In fact, it's in our nature to find quicker, safer, better solutions, things that require less effort, and everything about the technological developments of our society pinpoints this process. We found quicker, faster, better ways through. So when you're designing a street, what people now do, what the clever engineers now do, is that they set up AI cameras in locations to record the processes and movements of people so that they can find out what those desire paths are. Where do people naturally want to walk? And then we lay the paths to create that framework of safety for those people to operate. Now, this is really key. If we understand that people are naturally inclined to take a particular route, but we say, yes, but you mustn't do that because that's not what the paperwork says, and yet we fail to meticulously reinforce and support that process, we're simply doomed to fail. It does not matter what the paper and policy and procedure says. If it doesn't take into account the natural behavior of human beings, and we don't adjust our processes and policies and procedures in order to accommodate that, then whatever we do is doomed to meet with some degree of failure. And what ends up happening is those scaffolders and those pipe fitters and those welders and those bricklayers and those lifting operations will continue to bang on those pipes so that they can adapt their working method back to the way in which you think it's being done, when in reality, it's often never being done the way that we think it's being done at the point of work, because we only ever see what they want us to see if there's that disconnect. But, and here's the key, if we truly take the steps to engage with our operational teams, then we can get to grips with the challenges that they face, put ourselves in their position and reimagine those policies and procedures in such a way that they become effective. And I've got two examples of this before we open up for questions. So, number one, you may have seen one of these before. I certainly have seen these quite a lot. I work in highways, and in highways we engage in quite a lot of work that involves construction with concrete. And this here is a concreting glove. In all the RAMS policies and procedures, it says quite clearly that if you are handling cementitious materials, then you must wear a concreting glove. And yet, countless audits, time after time, month after month, year after year, have shown a consistent trend of operatives failing to comply with their PPE requirements. So we write them up, we give them a disciplinary. You know you're supposed to be doing this. You have these gloves available for you. Where are they? They're in my van. Well, why aren't you wearing them? I'll get them on. And that's the conversation dead in the water. When we take that adversarial stance, the conversation finishes. When there's a threat of reprisal for non-compliance, the conversation finishes. We never get to the truth because we create an atmosphere of fear whereby people will not tell us what they do normally because they're so afraid that something will go wrong if they do own up to that non-compliance. So let me ask you this. Have you ever worn one of these gloves? Have you ever tried to tie your shoelaces or operate some fine machinery with some thick, heavy gauntlets? I don't know if you've ever had these, but my grandmother had these in her house, always a set of oven mitts that were sat there either ready to take something hot from the oven or to give you a clip round the backside if you were doing something wrong. This glove was there for that, right? You may be familiar, but have you ever tried to tie your shoelaces wearing an oven glove? It's certainly not something I would attempt. But yet, these operatives on site had to consistently contend with tasks that required manual dexterity, and yet they are wearing something which has the dexterity capability of an oven glove. And this is what I found from talking with operatives, and this was, again, a pivotal change for me. Instead of disciplining, instead of writing up, the client had given us loads of grief about our personnel not wearing the correct gloves. It's kind of crazy if you think about it, because when you're handling cement or concrete containing materials, especially mortar, bedding, cement, whatever, you can get cracks and bleeding hands, cracked skin, itchy fingers. It's really not pleasant. But if the alternative is that you can't do your job, ultimately, we have people who want to go and get paid to provide for their family. And if the choice that they make is between having discomfort in their hands or not getting paid, I think we know what most people will choose. So we worked with these teams, and after giving and creating an amnesty for non-compliance, and this is really important, this is key, create an atmosphere of amnesty for consistent areas of non-compliance, because that allows us to find out the true scope and nature of the problem. As soon as we remove the fear of reprisal from these actions of non-compliance, we are then in a position of knowledge and understanding. Matt gave me the permission to use this photo. This is a ground worker called Matt. Really great guy, works out on the network all the time, muddy, harsh conditions. And Matt is a stickler for not wearing his PPE, right? This has always been the case. Whether it's his high-vis jacket not done up properly, whether he's not wearing his glasses, his chin strap. This must be probably one of the only times I've ever caught him with his chin strap actually done up. Through talking with Matt and his team, I was able to find that actually the gloves that they were using did not enable them to do their job effectively. And so what we did was we created a solution by going outside of the construction industry. We couldn't find a glove that suited all of the properties that we needed it to achieve, but we found this glove being used in the automotive manufacturing industry, which was both oil resistant, waterproof, and it had good grip, and it was very cut resistant. And more importantly, the operatives could use it, and they could use their fingers. So it protected their hands against the cement, but it also enabled them to perform their duties with confidence. And then something amazing happened. After providing these gloves to our operatives, we found that they were genuinely using them all the time for the tasks that they were doing. So much so, in fact, and this is why Matt's grinning face forms part of this presentation, that I once came to a point of work with Matt, and his jacket was undone. His glasses were in his pocket. His chin strap was undone, but he was wearing these gloves. And so what does that tell you? Well, I'll tell you what it tells me. He wasn't being lazy before when he wasn't wearing those gloves. We had just not identified what he really truly needed to be able to perform his job effectively. And let me take you back to that original point. Value. We are here to provide value and support for our operational teams. And when they're faced with a challenge that presents a hazard, in this case, chemical contact with hands, we need to provide a solution that actually enables our operational teams to perform their role. Otherwise, how can they effectively comply if the solution that we put in place does not enable them to perform their duty in that regard? And that brings me to the next point. If we truly watch what our operational teams are doing, and we genuinely listen to the challenges that they face, then we can seek first to understand. And that is absolutely critical if we are going to provide any form of policing or enforcement of policy. We must first seek to understand the nature of the challenges that our operational teams are exposed to. Now, this next part I'm going to take you through, I'm just going to touch on it because there's going to be some presentations coming very soon about this, which will explore it in a lot more detail, and you'd all be welcome to come and participate. Through these processes and procedures, and having gained recognition and industry awards as a result of providing this greater degree of support for operatives, I was enabled to work with some fantastic people who have helped support and provide initiatives that we have now in the pipeline. Those of you who are involved in underground services will understand the very real present danger that they represent to our workforce. Anyone in construction, anyone who's doing any kind of work that disturbs the ground can have catastrophic effects when we come into contact with underground services, be they gas, electric, water. Even fibre, going through fibre can cause problems for people with communication issues that then disrupt the quality of people's lives. So they may seem inconsequential at the point of work, but they can have significant communication breakdowns, can have significant impacts on people's lives. And yet, this is one of the least effectively managed hazards in the whole of construction, and far too many cables and pipes and other underground services are struck on a consistent, regular basis because of one unifying factor, and that is not having the correct level of competency at every step of an organisation to enable us to perform our roles as an organisation effectively. I was working with a young lad on site about 18 months ago who hit an electric cable as part of his daily activity. Thankfully, he made the right decision to step back and report this. Had he have tried to cover up the fact that he had done this, he would almost certainly have lost his life, because it was a 400 amp fuse on a live cable that he hit, and had he have gone anywhere near that fuse, it would not have tripped when he came into contact with that electric circuit. Empowering our operatives to know that they have our support and that we will not hang people out to dry purely because they failed to follow procedure, I firmly believe is what enabled this young lad to have the confidence to step back and report this accident instead of trying to hide it. If we create a culture of punitive behaviour where we are constantly penalising people for not following regulations without first truly understanding the nature of the challenges that they face, then they will not be honest and forthcoming when something goes wrong. And it is absolutely critical that we create a culture of trust and support and encouragement that enable our teams to make those safe decisions at the point of work. Now, despite his sensible actions in stepping away from this accident and not creating a further tragic event, this young lad was still in the firing line for disciplinary action because he had failed to follow procedure. And yet, when we fully explored this subject, what we found was it wasn't just the person not following procedure. For those of you aware of what a cat and jenny is, it's basically a cable avoidance tool, and it's one of the least well-utilized bits of kit that exists. Most people using this kit do not have the effective level of competency to use it properly in the way in which it's intended to be used. Now, we know that as an industry. So is it fair then to penalise this young lad for not having used this equipment? I say it's not. And I say instead we should look to ourselves and see, where did we fail to provide the relevant degree of support and encouragement to enable this person to perform their duty effectively? Remember, people are not lazy, but they will not do something unless they agree with the value of doing that thing. That's all of us. We don't do anything unless we understand that there is value in it. So we had failed to impart the value placed upon following those policies and procedures effectively. And as a result, a very near tragic event was only closely avoided. We must do better. And the way we do better, I put it to you, is by truly taking the step to create meaningful engagement with our workforce. When we first seek to understand the nature of the problem that truly presents itself to our workforce, only then can we start working to solve that problem. And now I can tell you this, I have an extreme privilege to be working with 20 of the UK's leading experts in everything to do with underground services, from the equipment manufacturers, radio detection and Leica, to the professors of Birmingham Civils University who wrote the book on underground service strikes and what they mean, to human factors specialists from the aviation industry who help govern and reinforce these processes in a palatable way, to expert trainers and civil engineering surveyors, to the people who wrote the legislation that governs these processes. HSG 47, the person who wrote the update to that, is now part of this team who is tackling this subject in a meaningful way. How absolutely incredible is that opportunity to really unify this and bring people together from all different sectors and disciplines and levels of expertise? We would have lost that if we'd simply blamed the operative for not following procedure. This project would never have started. But by seeking first to understand the nature of the challenges that he faced, we were then able to unpick the global nature of this problem, and the USP competency framework was born. And I had the privilege of receiving the SHP Trailblazer Award in recognition of just the start of that project. And I can tell you now, where this goes is so exciting, what we will achieve together as this team to provide support internationally for anybody who's breaking ground to do so in a safer way is just such an absolute honor and a privilege to be part of. And it's so exciting. I personally cannot wait to see where we take this next. And you're going to see this logo come up time and time again over the next 18 months. It hasn't been launched publicly yet, but it's coming very soon. And I can tell you this is all about driving meaningful engagement at every single step, at every stage of an organization. Have those challenging conversations, because without that, things like this cannot be born. Make sure that you truly drive meaningful engagement. First, have a look at the things that we could do better before we start penalizing the things that our personnel could do better. As I said, I am genuinely, truly excited to see where this project is going to go now. The question is, if you were to apply truly meaningful engagement to everything that you do and ask those questions and get stuck in, where will it take you? Thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure presenting, and thank you all for taking the time out to listen. And I'd like to welcome any questions now.
All right, thank you so much, Dave, for that very insightful presentation. Lots has been learned. I'm sure everybody got a thing or two from what you've shared. Yeah, we appreciate you sharing a bit.
Desiree, we're having real difficulty hearing you, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you, Desiree. Thank you, Dave. That was truly a remarkable presentation you just shared, and I believe I speak for every member of this call when I say the value you've impacted on us today has been truly, truly profound. My name is Jackson. I'll be handling the question and answer segment. And I don't know, I strongly believe some of us would have one or two areas for for further clarifications, for questions, and this is the right time for us to air those concerns. So I'll be handling the question and answer segment. So if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hands or type those questions in the chat section. Okay, the first question is going to come from Solomon. Solomon, the floor is yours, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Thank Mr. Dave for the wonderful presentation. I will actually say for you true that this presentation was actually for me, because I've learned a lot, and for us working, my question is a little bit, I won't say it's deviating, but it's in relation with what you just said. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Okay. For us working in the oil and gas industry, specifically the downstream sector, in our terminal, most of our people we receive in the terminals are much more of people that are not much knowledgeable. So, like all these tanker drivers and all those stuff. And in a situation that there is a standard already for before you load, you must pass some safety steps and all those stuff. And most of the time, these people, they violate safety rules. And like you said, we should respect our operation teams and in order to achieve the goal, because we are actually a support system to them. Here is my question. In a scenario that the operation team person that is on site, that is doing the loading operation, that actually know the company's health and safety policies, and also know that going against this is wrong from your normal perspective. But you already know your customer have violated it, and instead of you to correct them and do the rightful thing, you carry them along with the violation they've done. And when the health and safety personnel want to interfere, it seems that you are a problem to their operation. You don't want them to load. You are the health and safety department is frustrating their activity. So I want to ask, in this kind of scenario, what do you expect the health and safety person to do?
That's a great question, Solomon. Absolutely fantastic question. So we often find ourselves in this position. We often find ourselves in a position where we can come across as adversarial to an operation's requirements. And that can be for a number of different reasons. Ultimately, it comes back to this question of value. So sometimes trying to deal with something as it happens is very, very difficult, because the very nature of the situation unfolding presents time constraints and commercial pressure that doesn't exist so much at the planning stages. And so often we can find that if we tackle some of these situations at a much earlier stage, if we're aware of those challenges that are going to unfold, and we can tackle those at an earlier stage within the pipeline, that makes it much, much more effective than trying to hold up or stop something that we know is unsafe. However, that doesn't negate us from our responsibility to stop something from being undertaken that is unsafe. And so it becomes a question of consequence. So it's how then we communicate to our teams and to the people that we are responsible for, that the consequence of them not complying with your cease and desist order or your adaptation or whatever it is that you're requiring are way too significant for them and not to be countenanced. So if we can actually, if we have that question thrown at us, you're always getting in the way, you're trying to stop us, you're trying to stop us. It's one of the biggest challenges in health and safety. It's a great question. That the answer, the only real answer to that is ensuring that those operational teams understand that the consequence of them continuing is far, far worse than the consequence of them stopping. Now, depending on an organization's maturity level, that can be a real challenge. So there isn't a simple solution to that, but the solution is unified regardless. And that is, can we create a true and deep understanding of the value of consistent conformity with our standards and compliance with legislation? Can we impart that uniformed compliance as something that people feel empowered and engaged with? And often that can actually be through working with people to understand the consequences of their negative actions. One of the most common things that I ever get said to me, one of the most common challenges that anyone ever throws me is, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never had a problem. Who are you to tell me what to do? Fine, I understand that, right? I understand that. It's a good point. Someone's done something for 20 years. My answer now is quite simple. I ask them another question, say, have you ever heard of asbestos? Normally shakes them up a little bit, and then I can say, well, for years, asbestos was fine. We could all work with asbestos, no problem at all. You could use it in your house. You could do whatever you want with it. Now we understand later on that the consequences are tragic. So do we need to wait until someone has a significantly negative consequence, or can we use our power of influence and engagement with our teams to support them in understanding the value of sometimes stopping to prevent a catastrophe from unfolding? Because that's what it's all about. Ultimately, the cost of continuing will be higher than the cost of stopping. And so it's down to us to ensure that we bring those two things very firmly into our operational team's mind. Does that answer your question, Solomon?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. I'd like to answer. There was a question in the chat that I'd just like to take a second to answer, and I think it's a really good question from Desire, and that is, how do we draw the line between policing and enforcement? So enforcement is providing consequence for something that is either an undesirable or an illegal action. So if you think of enforcement in terms of the regulator, we have the health and safety executive here in the UK who will create enforcement action up to and including prosecuting and creating cease orders. So a company will not be able to continue to operate, and that's enforcement. Policing is the act of ensuring and monitoring that those policies and procedures are being maintained. So often people will be called a health and safety officer. I understand that sometimes, and in some heavily regulated industries, that is a requirement, that we do in fact need to have eyes on policing and then the follow-on to enforce those things. But I would say for a lot of the time, actually, it's that enforcement creates a barrier with true engagement. So policing is, in its core, is about stopping people from doing things wrong, rather than waiting until something goes wrong and then creating an enforcement, which is the later stage. Policing is about active monitoring and proactive engagement to prevent breaches and non-compliance. But remember what I talked about, and this is really key, policing ourselves first. If we're going to do this with any integrity, we should first ensure that we ourselves are not engaging in any blind eye activity or breaches ourselves where we're perhaps turning a blind eye to things that we shouldn't. So Desire, I hope that answers your question. I know that we have some issues hearing you, but perhaps you can come back.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you very much. We have one more question from Azubike Ohia. Mr. Azubike Ohia, please, the floor is yours. Hello, Azubike Ohia. Are you there?
Hear me? Hello? Hello?
I'm really sorry, we can't hear you. You're very quiet.
We can hear you. We can barely hear you. Can you
hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, Azubike here. Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello.
Okay, fine. We can hear you clearly.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, my question is now, in terms of compliance, where the organization.
I'm very sorry, but I can't hear you. Perhaps you could put your question in the chat. If you could type your question into the chat, I'd be very happy to answer it. But I'm really sorry, I can't hear you.
Hello, Azubike, can you type the question in the chat section? We can barely hear you.
Perhaps whilst we wait for that question to come through in the chat, Jackson, if you wouldn't mind me, there is one part from the presentation which I think was quite pivotal that I neglected to touch on, and that is when we're talking about engagement and we're talking about meaningful engagement, we have a wonderful opportunity here within IOSH to be those people who drive those changes. And if we lead by that example, then the people that we support will help encourage them to be able to do that as well. Now, I don't know if everyone on this call is aware, but due to these principles and applying these principles, I had the wonderful opportunity of having been co-opted into IOSH Council last year as a result of this. Driving these principles, and actually it's about everything. It's about driving that engagement, not just for our operatives, but it's about driving engagement throughout every stakeholder, throughout your business team, your directors, your company owners. It's also about internal and external stakeholders. It's about regulators. And for me personally, IOSH represents one of the very best ways in which you can do that. We would never have this wealth of experience and knowledge in the same place at the same time. And for those of you who aren't aware, IOSH Council literally encapsulates this process of the ability to drive meaningful engagement. And it's actually how I first came to be talking to you guys in this room from a conversation with one of the membership representation steering group sessions that we ran, was that Joseph reached out to me and we began this conversation. And that's because I'm passionate about making sure that people's voices are heard. And that's so important, that we as professionals have a platform to engage with those who regulate our industries, to provide additional support where sometimes we face these challenging issues. And that question which was raised earlier, forgive me, I forget who it was that raised the question, but it was an excellent question, and it's one which I believe should be explored as a subject on its own. And IOSH is really there to help you do that. So IOSH Council is made up of elected people who put themselves forwards to represent the views of people. And if you're here today listening to this, you're probably quite passionate about driving engagement already, otherwise you wouldn't be coming to this talk. You're probably quite passionate about talking and opening discussions. So consider putting yourself forwards as a member of IOSH Council. The voting is now open. I myself will also be putting myself forwards. My council tenure came to an end because my co-option has finished, and I myself will be putting myself forwards and asking people to vote for me on IOSH Council as well. But I would encourage everybody to really think IOSH is here for you to help drive that meaningful engagement and support you in those challenges that you have. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Thank you, Dave. Azubike is back on the call. Azubike, please, you have 1 minute to just air your question. Thank you. Hello, Azubike, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can barely hear you. Could you just drop the question as quickly as you can?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello.
We can
Hello,
hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, my question is, if you are working in an organization like in the dance research, just like the last person asked, you are talking about enforcement, ensuring that people comply, monitoring that people comply to existing regulation. Where the management fail to provide PPE, and your duty is to ensure that the workers comply to the use of PPE in the organization, especially in a restricted area. What are you going to do? Because sometimes we are faced with this challenge in a workplace where in a restricted area, hydrocarbon area, you are not supposed to make use of your phone. And some top management officers, managers are coming to that area without complying with the minimum PPE. How will you manage such situation, ensuring compliance in that kind of situation? That is my question, because it's a major challenge we are facing, especially in organizations are not complying with the ISO like management, that those lower organizations are not ISO compliance. How do you manage this situation? That is my question.
That's a fantastic question. I'm really sorry. As a dyslexic person, trying to pronounce your name is going to be very challenging for me, but I will do my best. Is it Azubuike? Thank you so much for your question. That's a great question, and it's probably one of the most important challenges that we will face as professionals in this industry. If you haven't yet faced this particular challenge, I would put it to you that you haven't pushed hard enough, right? And I know that that might be quite abrasive to people, and that might offend people even, but I would say that if you haven't yet come across this particular challenge that was just very well put forwards, then it's because you haven't dug deep enough. Because I guarantee you that within any organization, there exists examples of senior managers not complying with the regulations within which that they should comply. Now, the question quite simply is, how do we enforce the requirements and compliance for our workforce when the senior managers are setting a bad example or not providing or not complying with those regulations themselves? Have I understood that question correctly?
Yeah, exactly. That is the question.
So the answer is not an easy answer, I'm afraid, and that is this. There are two opportunities to create compliance. One is through encouragement and coaching and culture development, and the second is from enforcement and compliance monitoring. Now, the harder one to achieve is a cultural change, but it is definitely more effective in the long run, and that requires mindset coaching to engage with and influence the culture, the hearts and minds of people. In that particular moment that you find yourself in, where you are yourself the barrier in between a senior manager and the workforce, and often that person might be the person who decides whether or not you keep your job, that is a very, very difficult position to find yourself in. And you have one of two options. At that point where you find someone who's not complying, you have the option to either stop them anyway, regardless, and put your neck on the block, knowing fully well that you might end up losing your job as a result of that. Or the other choice that you have is you tolerate it and then you attempt to change the culture afterwards. Now, I am a big fan of public praise and private reprimand. I'm also a big fan of the principle of never causing someone unnecessary ego-based offense. So if you know for a fact that by pulling your senior manager up on this particular behavior in that moment is going to cause friction and it won't achieve traction. So in other words, if you know that right then and there, if you call them on it and you try to get them to stop, they're likely to just butt heads with you and then that's it. Then you don't achieve anything from having that argument then and there. But what you could perhaps think of doing is asking them to come with you somewhere private. Just say to them, I'm really sorry, I've got an emergency that I need to talk to you about. Can you come with me, please? Okay, now you take them out from that environment, away from the point of work. You don't criticize their action in front of the people that they are responsible for, and you don't put your own neck on the block in the same way, but then you can have that conversation with them privately and say, look, please, I am trying to create a culture where everybody is safe. I'm required to ensure that everybody maintains these standards. I cannot do that unless we set the examples, and always make it, I find this is so much more palatable, always make it about us, not about them. We don't point the finger, but we instead take ownership of this ourselves. So taking that personal accountability for that problem and saying, how can we ensure that our people follow the rules? I would suggest that we all must set the example. And that means if we're ever in a process area, we must wear whatever the PPE requirement are. We must not use our phones in workspaces. I've had it before. I've had to get fully changed into PPE, right, from my work gear, to open a barrier, to walk 20 feet into a site container, to then take my PPE back off so that I could have a conversation with the workforce. How many people do you think, honestly, would have not bothered and would have just opened the barrier and walked through it? Yeah, but I'm just doing this. No one would have probably pulled me on it because I'm a member of the senior management team. But I firmly believe that as senior managers, we must set the example for the very, very reason that you just presented. It was a fantastic question. I can't imagine that I'm going to give you all of the answers that you're looking for on that question right now. It's a fantastic question. It's a great topic. But I hope at least that has in some way helped answer your question, perhaps to a degree.
Mr. Zubike, I hope that Mr. Dave has aptly answered your question.
Yes, handsomely answered it, yes.
Oh, perfect.
Wonderful.
I'm very glad to hear that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Dave. This has truly been one of our most thoroughly engaging and enjoyable sessions. And on behalf of IOSH West African Network, South Region, I'm honored and privileged to present this certificate of appreciation to you, Mr. Dave McPherson, for a truly, truly engaging and insightful presentation. Your eloquence, your expert delivery, and the value you've so much immensely impacted on us today will not be forgotten in a hurry. Thank you very much, Mr. Dave. We hope to engage with you meaningfully in the future. Thank you.
Jackson, thank you so much. That means a lot, and I really, really enjoy that. Thank you. That's such a nice touch, and I really appreciate it. And honestly, I would, as I said at the beginning, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy. I've been supported. I've been so lucky to be supported by so many really wonderful people, and it would mean a lot to me to be able to provide support for other people as well in the same way. So please do reach out to me on LinkedIn. Send me a request. I'd love to connect with you, and we can continue this journey together after today. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day and giving me that precious moment of your time. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. This is over to you, please. This is over to you.
Please confirm.
They say your voice is breaking. We can't hear you very well. I think it's time for us to get feedback from the central. So I will use this opportunity to welcome Mr. Gabriel to give us feedback and information and updates from the central. Mr. Gabriel, you can take over.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Gabriel, and thanks, Dave, for that wonderful presentation. Okay, so I have a couple of announcements here from the Central. We've been able to affirm that IOSH is going to have a conference for West African Division, and the conference will take place next year, 2023, and the venue is in Accra, Ghana. So IOSH is will be hosting the events at Accra so that we can drive meaningful engagements at that part of the West African as part of the West African way to develop culture, safety culture, and drive engagement within the government. Also, we'll be also having an election at the North Central and Accra region, and the election will be coming up by September. The election will be taking place this year. So some of us, other ESCO or any of our active member, you might need your assistance as a volunteer during that thing. So the notice and everything will be given on our platform, on the IOSH platform. Then also, we are having some meaningful activity which members are actually been benefiting from our subcommittee. So if you're an IOSH member and you are having issue with how to do your development plan, how to log in your CPD, help has come now. So there's no need to shy away from it. A class was done two classes was actually done last week. So, and it's continuous. So now it will not be every I think twice in a month. But if you need any help, you can actually reach out to myself or Kemi. That's the vice chair. So we'll direct you to the CPD committee who can actually be of a greater help in that area. Then also for people, we also discovered that people who attend our meeting, not all of them are actually registered member of IOSH. But there is opportunity now for you to register for people who are not earning as much, especially when their the monthly salary is less than 500,000. With a concession form and your membership form that you fee, you can actually get a discount of 50% from IOSH. So, and also if you are renewing your membership and your monthly salary is less than that amount I call, that's 500,000 in Nigerian naira. So you have opportunity to also get a discount from IOSH, either when you are renewing your member or when you want to join as a new member. So if there's any other details you need aside from this, you can easily reach out to me or reach out to your chair, that's Jerome, or any of the regional ESCO. And you can also reach out to me on the WhatsApp. If you are not on the WhatsApp, you can drop your number. We'll add you to the people who are intending to join IOSH. Then by the time you join, you can be upgraded to the exclusive. So that's that apart from the Central. So over to you, Disa. Okay, Jackson, I think I'm done with the announcements.
Okay, Gabriel, thank you for that wonderful information from the Central. Sorry, I have a question to ask in regards to that. I don't know if I can go on.
Yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah, so
hello, can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. You said you made mention of our conference coming up next year, and it will be held in it will be holding in Ghana. So I want to know, for our members that want to come and that are residents in Nigeria, what is the plan and other logistics for them? And if there is nothing in place for them, how, since there is another country and not those countries have their immigration policies. So what are the plans for us also over here that we also wish to attend for members in the South?
Okay, yeah, I think of most important, the conference is going to be hybrid. So for our members who can actually the opportunity to go to Ghana, but we also need to know that Ghana is an ECOWAS country. So ECOWAS, that means that with your passport or Nigerian national ID card, I believe there won't be issue at the immigration points, either at the land border or the airport, especially with your passport. Then beside that, it's going to be an hybrid event that if you are not able to be there physically, you can join via especially the Zoom platform. For now, maybe later, I may not be able to say much on logistic for people, for members from here, so that I won't be committing myself on something I'm not. So, but I will discuss it with the chair and other ESCO. So if there's any arrangement for that.
Okay. Thanks for the information. I want to use this juncture. Any AOB? Okay, please, I will want us to turn our cameras on so that we can take a snapshot. Please, everyone, put on your camera on. Okay. At this juncture, I want to appreciate everyone, from our speaker, Mr. Dave, for that wonderful presentation. And I know each and every one of us learned a lot today. I will say for a while, this is one of an insightful presentation I've actually attended, and I really enjoyed it. So I will be hoping to have much more of this from the South region. And at this juncture, we will say thank you all, and I want to see you all next month for our CPD record presentation. Thank you.